Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so let's talk about that heavy, totally exhausting feeling in your chest. You know the exact feeling I'm talking about, right? You've been sitting at your desk for hours, staring at a textbook until the words literally start blurring together into this giant wall of gray text. You pour your precious time and energy into studying, but then you close the cover and your brain is just completely blank. It's like you just poured water into a sieve. If you've ever spent an entire night reading only to retain absolutely nothing when you wake up the next morning, well, this explainer is exactly for you. We're going to unpack the actual science behind why this happens, and more importantly, how to fix it.
But first, let's do a quick reality check before we jump into the solutions. I want you to honestly reflect on your habits right now. Do you ever feel like you're working twice as hard as everyone else, but somehow staying in the exact same place? I mean, you see your peers breezing through the material while you're putting in double the hours, but the results just aren't matching up to your effort. It's so frustrating. You kind of have to step back and ask yourself, are you actually learning, or are you just performing the act of being a student because, well, that's what you think you're supposed to do?
And what about when you finally sit down with your notes? Be totally honest with yourself here. Are you truly absorbing that knowledge? Or are you secretly praying for a spam email or just a completely random group chat text to save you from the sheer boredom of it all? Hey, it's okay to admit it. We've all been there. We've all stared blankly at a page while our minds desperately beg for literally any distraction to take us away from the monotony.
Now this next one. This one's a little tougher to admit. Deep down, in those quiet moments of frustration when you're alone at your desk, do you secretly believe you're just not smart enough? Do you have this nagging suspicion that maybe top grades are simply reserved for people with a naturally higher IQ, and you just don't have the hardware for it? It's a really painful thought, and honestly, it carries a ton of deep-seated anxiety and feelings of inadequacy.
Okay, let's imagine a scenario for a second. Imagine I came over right now and completely confiscated your neon highlighters, your flashcards, and your massive textbook. Just poof, gone. Could you look me in the eye and explain even one core concept to me in your own words? Or does your knowledge completely vanish the absolute second the book is closed? This little thought experiment really exposes the massive illusions so many of us fall for when we rely entirely on passive study tools.
And here's our final, really piercing diagnostic question. Are you studying to actually know and master the material? Or are you just trying to survive the anxiety of the next exam? Really think about your ultimate goal here. So many of us are trapped in this constant survival mode, just trying to cram enough random facts into our short-term memory to pass a test on Friday before promptly forgetting the whole shebang by Monday. That's a cycle of stress, you guys, not a cycle of learning.
So, if those questions made you feel a little exposed, well, welcome. I know exactly how exhausting it is to feel like you're constantly fighting an uphill battle. But please hear this loud and clear. The problem is not you. I'm going to say that again because it's absolutely crucial. The problem is not you. You aren't lazy. You definitely aren't stupid. The simple truth is, you just weren't taught how your brain actually works when it comes to retaining information.
All right, so let's fix this. We're going to look at the powerful insights from the source material for today's explainer, which is this fascinating book called How to Study Like a Genius by Shadow Books. What's so incredible about this text is that researchers found the world's most successful learners don't actually study longer. No way. They just deploy very specific, repeatable routines. We're going to use the Genius system outlined in this book to systematically dismantle the lies you've been taught about studying. And along the way, we'll directly answer those painful questions we just went through.
Let's tackle that first feeling of working hard but getting absolutely nowhere. The source material explains that most students deeply confuse time spent with learning done. You can sit at a desk with the book open for 6 solid hours, but if your brain is passive, you'll retain almost nothing. Think about it. Staring at an open book for 6 hours is exactly like sitting in a gym for 6 hours without lifting a single weight. The clock on the wall doesn't build muscle, and it certainly doesn't build memory. True learning is measured entirely by your level of understanding and your ability to actually recall that information later.
Now let's move on to our second problem, distraction. Why do we constantly wait for our phones to ring while studying? Well, this book clearly shows that distraction is not a willpower failure, it's an environmental failure. If your current study method is incredibly boring and passive, your brain is literally starving for engagement, and a starving brain is naturally going to hunt for cheap dopamine, like, picking up your phone. You have to change the environment of your learning so it actually feeds your brain, rather than just trying to force yourself to focus through sheer willpower.
And what about that awful voice in your head whispering that you just aren't smart enough? The source completely dismantles this whole IQ myth. Listen to this.
Genius-level learners do not automatically have a magically higher intelligence. They just use better systems. They've actually built the skill of learning. The absolute truth is, skill beats talent every single time. It is all about how you approach the material, not the hardware you are born with.
So you're probably wondering, what exact system do these genius learners use? Okay, let's dive into this three-step process outlined in the text. Step 1, break complex topics down. Step 2, create manageable chunks. Step 3, prevent working memory overload. Instead of trying to swallow a whole textbook chapter on, say, biology all at once, which, by the way, immediately causes your brain to panic and shut down, you systematically deconstruct it. You take one chunk, like cellular division, and master that before moving on. This specific process prevents that overwhelmed feeling and allows your working memory to actually process what it's seeing without crashing like an overloaded computer.
We all fall for the highlighter trap, right? Painting our pages neon yellow to create what the text calls familiarity. And let me tell you, familiarity is a total lie your brain tells you to make you feel safe. You read a highlighted sentence and your brain goes, "Oh yeah, I know that," simply because you recognize the words from the last time you looked at them. But actually, scratch that. It's an illusion of competence. You're just confusing processing fluency with actual retention.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference, recognition versus memory. You think you know the material because your eyes easily recognize the shapes of the words, but visual recognition is not true memory. True memory is like having the missing puzzle piece right there in your mind, ready to place without even looking at the box. The book clearly shows a hard, undeniable truth here. If you can't explain a concept simply, entirely in your own words, without looking at the text, you haven't actually learned it yet. It really is that simple.
Now, let's address studying for survival. This source explains that the brain absolutely does not learn well under emotional pressure. When you're frantically studying while anxious, terrified of failing the test tomorrow, your memory actually weakens. Survival mode actively blocks retention. So we have to make the deliberate shift from that panicked emotional studying to strategic studying, where you take a deep breath, calm down, and your focused goal becomes true mastery of the subject matter.
So why do we still struggle so much with this? Well, because we've been lied to for years by an outdated education model that basically just told us to read more and study longer. But here's the ultimate paradigm shift. The brain actually needs struggle to learn. You have to stop looking for what is easy and start looking for what is active. Learning requires friction. You literally have to forge the connections in your brain like a blacksmith. That mental struggle, that friction you feel when you try to recall something from memory, it's not a sign you're stupid, it is the biological requirement for growth.
Okay, let's summarize the core science here. We tend to avoid testing ourselves without our notes because discovering gaps in our knowledge feels exactly like failure. But listen, every time you test yourself and find a gap in your knowledge, you aren't failing. You are exposing the exact spot where a new neural connection needs to grow. You need to stop fighting your brain's natural biology and start working with it. Active learning, like testing yourself, recalling information, explaining it out loud, that is the only true path to mastery. You are completely capable of learning anything if you just apply the right active system.
Remember, you do not need a higher IQ. You just need a better system. Think about the amazing possibilities that open up once you remove the illusion of passive study and fully embrace the active struggle of true learning. So I'll leave you with this final thought. If you could learn any skill or subject in half the time, what would you finally have the courage to pursue? Keep that incredible potential in mind as you tackle your next big challenge. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep actively learning.